The following program is rated H for human history. It may include speculation, bias, and factual errors.
Hello, Madlang people! I've been waiting for you. So you've ever wondered what the Aztecs and the Mongols were doing at the same time as the French and the Scots were fighting the British? Then wonder no more. I've been compiling maps and histories from all over the world into this video series to explore these things. I'm talking about the 14th century in specific at the moment. That is from 1300 until 1400. I always get confused about that myself. 1300 to 14th century. Makes no sense. I've scoured Wikipedia and other parts of the web for information on this video. However, as any teacher can tell you, Wikipedia is not the most reliable source of information. While doing research, I found out that the first game of rugby league was played way back in 1342. Fascinating, isn't it? Well, it's too bad that it's a load of rubbish. You see, after doing research, I found out that, let me read this, many kinds of football had been played as early as the 10th century. The game of rugby didn't develop into today's form until the 19th century, not to mention that the sport of rugby league split off from the Rugby Football Union in 1895, those two being two different sports now, marking the first rugby league game about 553 years later than the article on Wikipedia claimed. When going through all the available information we have nowadays, it can be very frustrating when different sources give us different names, give different details, different dates even, for the same events, the same places and the same people. So with all the cross-referencing and all the research that I can do, I still have to pick which ones to use, which ones to drop out. And there's going to be mistakes and errors. So make sure to call me out on them in the comment section. Now riddle me this. If a tree falls in the forest,
but no one was there to hear it,
did it make a sound? It's a stupid question, I know, but the same thing applies to history. If an event happened, but no one was there to record it, it still happened, right? Well, so much of our history is just that. Things happen, but we don't know anything about it today. And then there's oral history. People have always been telling their children stories about their ancestors, exaggerating the details over time, creating legends, and epics, and monsters. Those stories should not be disregarded because they do shape the cultures from which they come, and they tell us a grain of truth once the fantastic is peeled away. Another thing to keep in mind is that when records are available, they might not contain the entire truth. You see, it is said that history is written by the victors. That is often correct, because powerful rulers would charge the historians to write about them in a favorable light, while dehumanizing the enemy. Meanwhile, the enemy does the exact same thing, which results in conflicting records, just as biased. Well, just like with the myths, the fantasy must be stripped away and different sources compared to reveal the truth. Let's take my home country Iceland for example. In history class we've always been told that this island, far away in the north from the rest of Europe, was settled around 870 AD by a Norseman of the name Ingólfur Arnarson. We know this because the first Icelandic historian, Ari Thorgilsson the Learned, recorded this about 300 years after the fact. Quite recently though, geneticists have shown that over 50% of women and 75% of the male population of the early settlers of Iceland had Gaelic blood, that is to say, Irish or Scottish roots. Now it could be that these Gaelic people were the slaves of the Vikings, or maybe they were there first, and just mingled with the Viking population that joined later on. Ari the Learned might not have known these details 300 years later, or maybe he did not want to mention them because of political reasons. And so with historians using modern technologies, we can shed more light on these events and see them through the glasses of the modern age. In any case, if you want to know more about our rich culture and heritage, then you have to dig deeper than what they teach in school history books. Well, that's enough for the tangent for now. Start with the 14th century, okay? Shall we? In Japan, the recently crowned Emperor Fushimi II is forced to abdicate. He is succeeded by his second cousin, Emperor Nijo II. It is important to note, however, that the emperors had little power at the time due to the ruling Kamakura shogunate. And moving west, the young Ottoman Empire defeats the Byzantines at the Battle of Bapheus. As a result, the Byzantines lose their stronghold on their Asian territories, which get taken by the Ottoman Turks one by one. You might know that the Byzantines are also called the Eastern Roman Empire, which survived the Western Empire by a long shot, and was even a contemporary of the Roman successor state, the Holy Roman Empire. In 1303, a massive earthquake estimated around 8 Richter hits the Aegean Sea, causing massive damages and loss of life in Crete, Egypt, and other places. The Great Pyramid suffers damages, and the lighthouse of Alexandria is left in ruin. 20 years later, another earthquake would topple what's left of the lighthouse, only leaving the Great Pyramid of Giza as the last wonder on Earth standing. It's a shame, really. But I do have to wonder, how do they even calculate the strength of an earthquake back then? Anyway, let's head east. By the end of the 13th century, the Great Mongol Empire had split into several states called Khanates. The Khanate of the Great Khan, or the Yuan dynasty, which was comprised of the Mongol homeland, China, and much of Eastern Asia, the Chagatai Khanate, with Western China and some of the Stan countries, the Ilkhanate in Persia, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and lastly, the Khanate of the Golden Horde, stretching from Kazakhstan to Ukraine. It was ruled by 2 khans, thus technically being split into the White Horde in the east and the Blue Horde in the west. These states, who had been in conflict with each other, finally signed a peace treaty in 1304, beginning a new era of Mongol stability and expansion. However, the problem with the Mongols was that conquest was so integrated into their culture that they had no problems with conquering each other. Thus, further defragmentations of these states over the course of the 14th and 15th century would eventually lead to a severe decline of the Silk Road, the trading route between Europe and the Orient. Well, spoiler alert for the movie Braveheart, I suppose. No idea though, I've never actually seen the movie. William Wallace, a key figure in the First War of Scottish Independence from England, is captured and soon executed. Despite this, the Scots would secure their independence in 1328. The English royalty would not give up on Scotland, however, leading to the Second War shortly after. And back to the continent, King Philip IV of France, in need of money, exiles all Jews and confiscates their property. In the following year, on a Friday the 13th no less, he goes after the Knights Templar to pay his war debts from fighting England. His son, King Louis X, would allow the Jews to return in 1315. Note that I'm not alluding to the 100-Year War here, which starts around 1337, but to another Anglo-French war, which just concluded in 1303. Wilhelm Tell, forced by the evil Lord Gessler, shoots an apple off the head of his own son. Tell would later kill the tyrant and become a hero to the Swiss people. Inspired, the leaders of Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden swear an oath to rebel against the Habsburg rulers and establish the Swiss Confederacy, with more cantons joining over time. The account of these events is semi-legendary and may or may not have actually occurred. I should mention that both the Swiss and the Habsburgers were in the Holy Roman Empire at the time, which was less of an empire and more of a confederation of sorts, where the emperor got elected in by the prince-electors. Well, this next one, however, is right outside the border of the empire. The Kingdom of Hungary, which had disintegrated into smaller states, elects Charles I as the king in 1308. Charles had already been provisionally crowned in 1301 and gained the Pope's support in 1303, but was not acknowledged by the local rulers, many of which supported his rivals. Even after being crowned with the Holy Crown in 1310, most nobles would still not accept him. Therefore, Charles would need to take over the provinces by force, one by one, finally uniting the kingdom in 1323. And on we go to the last Muslim territory on the Iberian Peninsula. Sultan Muhammad III of Granada and his vizier, who holds more power than the actual sultan, become unpopular among their people when three neighboring nations join forces to invade the emirate. Their palaces are overrun by mobs, and the vizier is killed. The sultan is forced to abdicate in favor of his brother Nasser, who manages not only to make peace with the Marinids, but also to defend against the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, despite losing Gibraltar. And back to France. Many of the Order of the Knights Templar have been arrested throughout Europe, since nasty rumors about them started surfacing in 1307. 54 of them, having confessed under torture, are burned at the stake in Paris in 1310. In 1312, Pope Clement V would disband the order and have their assets given to the Knights Hospitaller Order. Two prominent Templars would be burned in 1314, exclaiming as they died, "Soon calamity will befall those who have condemned us to death." Both Pope Clement V and King Philip IV of France would die the same year. The last remnants of the Knights Templar on the Iberian Peninsula would rename itself the Order of Christ, and still operates today. Now, the Knights Templar are always a highly debated subject. It's therefore very difficult nowadays to tell if they were guilty or not. However, King Philip, I don't think he was interested in their guilt or not. He just wanted their assets. About the Knights Hospitaller, however, or the Knights of Malta, they still exist today as a special auxiliary volunteer corps of the Italian military with both ground and air forces. They became famous during the World Wars for operating hospital trains. Additionally, branches of the order who converted to Protestantism during the Reformation also still operate today as the Orders of St. John. The Lincoln Cathedral in England surpasses the Great Pyramid of Giza as the world's tallest man-made structure. Although it would not keep the title for very long, it is the first time in millennia that the world's tallest structure is built. Hard to believe nowadays that the record seems to be beaten every few years. The Genoese navigator Lancelotto Malosello rediscovers the Canary Islands. They had previously been discovered by the Romans in the 1st century, who thought them to be uninhabited. However, when Malosello arrived, he encountered an indigenous people called Guanches, ruled by King Zonzamas. Malosello would stay for nearly 2 decades before being driven out by the Guanches. In the following century, the islands would be conquered by the Spanish Kingdom of Castile. Now, the Guanches are interesting. They were the last European peoples to still only have Stone Age technology. However, there seem to be cultural similarities to Mesoamerica, leading some to believe that the Guanches actually made it to America in pre-Columbian times. Mansa Musa I is appointed ruler of Mali, as the previous Mansa heads out on an expedition to the Atlantic Ocean, never to return. Due to the gold mines in the empire, Musa would become one of the richest people in the Middle Ages, drawing the eyes of the world towards Mali. I do wonder where the previous king was headed though. Maybe he went and met the Guanches. King Håkon V of Norway lived in Oslo when his brother, the previous king, died heirless. He proceeded to construct a fortress there for him to live in. In 1314 he appoints an Osloan dean as chancellor and thereby moves Norway's capital from Bergen to Oslo. King Håkon would die in 1319 and be succeeded by his 3-year-old grandson Magnus VII. Remember this toddler king, he'll appear again later on. It is estimated that around this time, the Egyptian capital Cairo surpasses Hangzhou as the largest city in the world. The Chinese city of Hangzhou had been the most populous city since the late 12th century and even served as capital, until the Yuan dynasty established Dadu as the new capital, which was to become Beijing. Cairo would lose the title back to Hangzhou after the plague would devastate the city. Oh boy, the plague. I'll get into that in the next episode. Louis of Burgundy and Ferdinand of Majorca both claim the principality of Achaea through their wives. During the ensuing Battle of Manolada, Ferdinand dies after being knocked off his horse. Louis, however, dies only a month after the battle, leaving his widow as Princess Matilda of Achaea. This seems to be a typical case of when two are fighting, the third one rejoices, though I doubt she was rejoicing much with her husband being dead and all. A great famine ravages Europe. Caused by crops failing from 1315 throughout 1316, the famine resulted in millions of deaths and caused crime, disease, and even cannibalism. Though it finally subsides in 1317, it would take Europe 5 years to recover from the disaster. Now let me tell you, Adobe Animate did not like this part. Too many crops on screen made the program hang the entire time and just couldn't get it to export whatever I did. After much strife and civil war between King Birger of Sweden and his brothers, he imprisoned and likely starved them. After their deaths, the brothers' supporters rise up and exile the king to Denmark. In 1319, he would be replaced by his nephew, King Magnus IV, the same 3-year-old who would be king of Norway a few months later. I told you that toddler king would be back, and it's not the last time we see him either. The city of Ani in Sakharid, Armenia is devastated by an earthquake. The city used to be an important trading center in previous centuries. Now people leave the partial ruin en masse. It would be rebuilt though, and even briefly become the capital of the Black Sheep Empire. I enjoy the existence of a Black Sheep Empire just way too much. History can be hilarious at times. Well, let's go back to France again. A teenage shepherd claims to have been told by the Holy Spirit to rid the Iberian Peninsula of Muslim Moors. This leads to the Second Shepherd's Crusade. Many young men, women, and children flock together to head south, despite being ordered to stop by the kings of France and Aragon and even the Pope himself. The mob would never make it to the Moor territories, but on their way they would massacre hundreds of lepers and Jews before being dispersed by Aragonian forces. You know, this would be funny if it wasn't so incredibly tragic. But this leads us to the leper scare. Rumors, likely started by the shepherd's mob, circulate that lepers sent by Moors and Jews are trying to poison the Christians in southern France. This leads to more violence and the expulsion and execution of many lepers. And now, away from France, far to the east. The Sanzan, or three-mountain period, begins on Okinawa. It is possible that a unified Ryukyu kingdom split in three, but it's more likely that many smaller nations unified into three bigger kingdoms: the Northern Mountain, the Central Mountain, and the Southern Mountain. They would ultimately unite a century later, but because local traditions differ greatly from Chinese and Korean records, it is unclear if these three separate entities even existed. Regardless, the islands continue to be an important trading hub in East Asia. Well, it's not just medieval records that contradict each other. Wikipedia articles do too. Oh joy. In 1323, a treaty is signed between the Kingdom of Sweden and the Russian Novgorod Republic to end border disputes between the nations. A similar treaty would be signed in 1326 by Novgorod and Norway, but due to massive shared regions, this would inadvertently lead to the exploitation of the Sami peoples, with both nations taxing them. And yep, that still depicts the same toddler king from earlier. However, the signing of those treaties was probably done by some regions. The wealthy Mansa Musa I of Mali makes a pilgrimage to Mecca. His escort includes 60,000 men, roughly 25,000 kilograms of gold, and many, many animals. On his way, he is said to give gold to cities, traders, and the poor, and that he builds a mosque every Friday. Incidentally, by flooding the market, he would single-handedly create a massive gold recession. This pilgrimage would quite literally put the Mali Empire on the map. The Moroccan adventurer Ibn Battuta would set on his pilgrimage the following year. He would continue his journeys for 30 years and visit much of the Muslim and Mongol lands. By the end of his travels, he would make his way to Mali, where he would meet Mansa Suleiman, brother of the by then deceased Mansa Musa. Suleiman actually succeeded Musa's son, who also had passed away by that point. Well, for now, let's make our way across the pond. The Aztec Mexica city, Tenochtitlan, is founded on an island in a lake where an eagle holding a snake sits on a cactus in fulfillment of a prophecy. This symbol of the eagle on the cactus is found today on Mexico's flag and coat of arms. The city of Tenochtitlan would become the capital of the mighty Aztec Empire, which would only fall when the Spanish arrived 2 centuries later. Well, let's leave it here for now. I'll continue in the next part. But if there's anything that you think should be included, write it down below, and if I see it, I might include it in the next part. But if you want to learn more, remember to dig deeper than what they teach in school, and deeper than what I teach here. So, see you next time. Bless, bless.
This program was rated H for human history. It may include speculation, bias, and factual errors.